Hello and welcome to Green Shift Business Line's video series on clean tech. I'm your host M Ramesh. We are recording this on the 29th of December. The year that is coming to a close, 2025, has been a memorable year for the Indian renewable energy sector. In this video, we will see how the Indian renewable energy sector crossed several significant milestones, at least 8 of them. Please stay with us till the end. The first milestone was crossed quite early this year in January when the solar installed capacity crossed the 100 gigawatt mark. Today it stands at 133 gigawatts. To put this into perspective, India's solar story started in 2010 with the launch of the National Solar Mission. At that time, India's solar installed capacity was almost zero. It took 8 years for India to touch the 20 gigawatt mark. This milestone was crossed in January 2018. So, India took 8 years to achieve 20 gigawatts, but in the next 8 years, India has added 5 times as much, that is, more than 100 gigawatts. While it must be recognized and acknowledged that largely this happened because the Chinese module manufacturers hammered the prices down so low that solar installations took off in India and elsewhere in the world. However, the government of India deserves credit for unfurling the sails to catch the favorable winds. 100 gigawatts is no mean task. The second milestone is that of rooftop solar capacity, which is actually a subset, a part of total solar installed capacity. Now, this subset had been a laggard for many years for various reasons, but it's picked up pace in 2025. At the end of November, rooftop solar capacity stood at 23.16 gigawatt, which means that when the December numbers come in, it's very likely that total rooftop solar capacity would have crossed the 25 gigawatt mark. Of course, we'll have to wait until the December numbers come in. The third milestone that the Indian renewable energy sector crossed pertains to the wind industry. The Indian wind industry drove past the 50 gigawatt mark in 2025. Wind again was dormant for many years but picked up speed now. The current financial year 2025-26 promises to be a record year for wind installations because in the first half of the year, fresh installations were over 3 gigawatts. This means that the industry is heading to beat the 2016-17 record achievement of 5.2 gigawatts by a comfortable margin. The fourth milestone that the industry zipped past pertains to solar module manufacturing capacity, which again crossed the 100 gigawatt mark in August. When the National Solar Mission was launched in 2009-2010, as it can be imagined, India hardly had any solar manufacturing capacity, which means that in about less than a decade and a half, India has managed to set up 100 gigawatts of manufacturing capacity. In fact, it has grown a lot more than that as we speak now. This has largely been possible because of Government of India's local-only policy for government-subsidized schemes. On the supply side, the government brought in 40% customs duty on imported modules and 25% on imported cells. Cells are made into modules. Now, this largely was meant to protect the Indian industry, which was a fledgling industry. It is now becoming more and more mature. Alongside, the government also brought this ALMM scheme, which means that any solar module manufacturer and cell manufacturer to sell his products in India would need to first get the approval of Government of India before putting his product into the market. This is largely seen as a measure also to keep the Chinese manufacturers out of India. So on the demand side, there was a support from government. On the supply side, there's also a support from the government. And now, today we have ended up with 100 gigawatts of solar module manufacturing capacity. However, One point needs to be remembered here. There is a view among experts that India could be heading for a glut in module supplies. This is because while India has module manufacturing capacity of 100 gigawatts or more, the market demand is much less, something like 30 or 40 gigawatts. The fifth milestone that the Indian renewable energy sector crossed is one that has largely gone unnoticed. The government company Solar Energy Corporation of India, SECI, a company primarily mandated to come out with capacity auctions for renewable energy, recently completed its 150th energy storage linked tender. Its first ESS linked tender came out in 2019 for 3.2 megawatt hours for Leh, and now SECI has done 150th tender. That's quite a milestone. The sixth milestone is a related one. India crossed the 200 gigawatt hour mark this year in terms of total storage linked renewable energy capacity tenders. Today, there are tenders worth 212 gigawatt hours of energy storage linked renewable energy capacity, of which 87 gigawatt hours are for battery energy storage systems, BESS, and 124 gigawatt hours for pumped storage plants. In fact, it is the advent of economically viable storage that has made both solar and wind power capacities to soar. Today, almost all the tenders are for firm-dispatchable renewable energy, or FDRE, which means renewable energy is to be supplied as demanded and not as and when generation permits. Now we come to the seventh milestone. It is in 2025 that India's total non-fossil fuel energy capacity crossed the 250 gigawatt mark. While doing so, it also crossed the 50% mark, that is, non-fossil fuel based electricity generation capacity is more than 50% of the total electricity generation capacity in the country. The eighth milestone that India crossed is in terms of the number of solar powered agricultural pumps under the PM Kusum scheme. To be precise, under the category B of the PM Kusum scheme. Now, the scheme has a target of 1.4 million pumps. By the end of November, India had done 9.42 lakhs or 942,000 pumps. So it is very likely that it would have crossed the 10 lakh mark or 1 million mark in December. We will know for sure when the December numbers come. 2025 will also be remembered for some very interesting landmark policy measures. One of them, for instance, pertains to splitting of the day into solar and non-solar hours for the purpose of allocation of transmission capacity. Earlier, transmission capacities used to be allocated to solar power plants, and when the solar power plants were not generating electricity, the transmission capacity stood locked or blocked by the solar power plants. Now, by splitting the day into solar and non-solar hours, the government has freed up transmission capacities so that other sources of renewable energy such as wind can come in and use that capacity. It's a very big measure. It's, largely gone under the radar, but we will see its effect in the coming years. The other major policy reform that was taken this year happened actually during the closing days of this year, December 24th, really. The Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, CER, which is the federal electricity regulator, notified the guidelines for virtual power plants, notified the guidelines for virtual power purchase agreements or VPPAs. Now, what are virtual power purchase agreements? That is a subject for another video, but suffice to say for now that it is largely believed by experts that VPPAs will pave the way for solar developers, for renewable energy developers to put up merchant power capacities, which means they will put up plants which are not necessarily tied up with buyers in long-term power purchase agreements. So this is a measure that is expected to expand the market for renewable energy. In sum, 2025 has been a very exciting year for the Indian renewable energy sector, but 2026, it is expected, can do even better. But it is expected that its successor, 2026, will prove to be no less. Thank you.